Hello, I'm David Hunt, and welcome to The Art Hunter. Over the past 2 decades, my guest today has established himself as an international artist with distinctive large-scale portraits and multimedia installations. Moving from Geelong, because he was a skateboarder, ooh, look at him, to Melbourne, he all of a sudden discovered the wonderful world of graffiti and street art here in Melbourne. And all of a sudden he was won over. He then went on to not just do street art or graffiti, he takes over buildings, houses, you name it. He uses it at the interior as his painting form. And what an achievement he's done. He's now got a reputation around the world for these incredible, do you call them installations? We'll find out anyway. And of course, the latest one is on right now here in Melbourne at the Flinders Street railway station upstairs in that wonderful ballroom area. Rone, welcome and thank you for being on The Art Hunter.
Thanks for having me, David.
Look, I've been following your career for quite a few years now. I've stood out for 2.5 hours to look at a house that all the houses around it were demolished, and that was back in the early days, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2017, I think.
2017, right. And you took over this house. Tell our viewers what you did.
It was the holdout house for a large development. I think it was actually the holdout house for the entire paper mill for many, many years before that. And then the whole paper mill was sold to developers, and one of the developers is a collector of mine, and I basically asked to paint some sites around the paper mill before it got demolished, and one of the sites was that house. And, I know how to paint on a wall. That was something I could do, and I was like, oh, the inside of this house might be interesting, but it wasn't actually abandoned. It was, packed up and moved out, and so the whole interior of the house was just clean and left.
Yeah.
And there was like
an empty house.
So there wasn't really a soul left in there. It was almost like you could have moved into it. And I was like, okay, I can paint the walls, but I realized that it's not the house, it's not the paint on the walls, it's the furniture and the objects, and like that's what actually gives it character. And that's when I began working with Carly Spooner, who's a set dresser, interior designer, and she's a longtime friend of mine and my wife, and she just helped me source a lot of furniture and bits and pieces like that, and we just started to play with that idea, and we realized we could start to tell stories with these objects, and it just opened me up to a whole new dimension of work.
Yeah, but what you did, so look, you virtually was walking through a creaky house, and there were even bits of the plaster removed with the light shining through it to give that image, and plaster being stripped off walls, and leaves in the corners because the wind had blown through. But you created that whole feeling with your beautiful painted art on the walls, and I queued for 2 hours, and it was on the news, TV news that night as well. So that was the start of this journey, wasn't it?
I guess it was a big introduction to my work for a lot of people, definitely. I feel like, I'm always, can't see the forest through the trees. I feel like I've been on the journey for years to get to that point. But yeah, it was definitely a tipping point for me, that house.
Because what you had done beforehand with a lot of buildings that were being demolished, you would paint and then take the photo and then release them to the general public to purchase or to see on social media.
Correct.
So that's the way you were doing it, and then people wanted to see inside of your world, and that's what you were creating.
Yeah, so when, previous to that, I was able to, go into a real abandoned house and paint there with or without permission. And then I would come back and photograph it, but I wanted to take the best photograph I could. So, you might move the chair or open the curtain so the light comes in, or come in at a certain time of day, or a classic trick was, you would wet the floor so it'd have a reflection in there, and it just kind of exaggerates the space and the moment. And so moving into these almost fictional spaces, it's like it is doing the same kind of concept and idea, but just taking it to, like, I just realized, like, it's art, there's no rules.
Yep.
I can kind of do whatever I want.
Yep.
And it's like, all right, so I'm just going to really just exaggerate this.
Yep.
And I think
Yep.
that's what
Yep.
a lot of art is about, just exaggerating these kind of things. And like, oh, the wall's cracked. It's like, oh, well, let's just put a giant crack in it. And there's a few leaves in here. It's like, oh, let's just bring in like a ton of leaves and just go over the top. And so it just became a lot of fun to kind of do that. And it just made it more, I guess, theatrical. Yeah.
Yep. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And we'll get to that word theatrical a little bit later. What was it like for you as a Geelong boy? I mentioned that at the start, to actually then Geelong Gallery to have an exhibition of your work.
Yeah, that was a true kind of honour, and to be asked by the Geelong Gallery, which means a lot to me. Growing up in Geelong, and I studied literally across the park at the TAFE, Gordon TAFE there.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So there was a real connection.
Absolutely. So when I'd leave the TAFE building, I had to walk past. It's pretty much the first building that you walk past to go back into the city or the town and catch my bus home.
Yeah.
So I'd pretty much walk past there every day.
Yeah.
For a couple of years. And so it was a real kind of icon for me. And it was like nice to pop in, and I'd never really thought of seeing myself within the space, because I think I saw a lot of the work as being more classical oil paintings, and
yes,
I was more into, let's say, skateboard graphics at the time. That was probably what was more interesting to me at the time. So I never saw myself, going towards, this fine art oil painting that could ever be in such a gallery. So to have my work in there was surreal.
And they let you do your thing, like create the dust bowl in the corner of the leaves and whatever. Yeah,
to completely take over the gallery from floor to ceiling, wall to wall, and to put it into a full dilapidated state. And I could only do that with the skills and knowledge of all the previous projects. Like, I can make actually something look a lot more old and destroyed than it actually is.
Yep.
It's a lot easier to work with than actually a space that is dilapidated and unsafe and has real black mold. And it's like you can't actually bring people into those places. So it's like, and I've learned a lot of these tricks of how to create that kind of environment. Then all of a sudden, you go up into the Dandenongs to this extraordinary building. What was the building? It was it's called Burnham Beaches. Yeah, so it was a mansion built. I'm going to forget the year. I reckon the 20s, 30s. Art Deco. It was an Art Deco building. By Alfred Nicholas. I think it was Nori who designed it. I'm forgetting the name right now, but. It looked like a ship, like an old, not the Titanic, but it was this beautiful, majestic
well, that's what
building.
Art Deco was, and it was, well, it still is a beautiful building. And it was a private house, and then it was also a guest house or something like that. They added a few extra wings at some point, I don't know, 70s, 80s. And so then it had another 60 rooms adjoining it. But the original house is kind of what I focused on, and it had these giant windows overlooking the gardens and just surrounded by the forest. It was just this iconic beauty. But it wasn't one or two rooms like a house. No. This was, how many, do you remember how many rooms it was? I think we did maybe 14
rooms, installations.
Staircases with beautiful paintings down
chandeliers,
the chandelier, and it was just magnificent. And there was one shot that I remember getting of looking through one door and down the hallway to see your painting on the walls, but with all the leaves everywhere and the cobwebs but then there was this one room where there was waters, on the floor, and it looked like quite deep that the room was sinking. And then you had a bookcase at the back, and on the spine was your painting.
Yeah.
That was extraordinary. It took my breath away.
Oh, thanks. It was one of those ridiculous ideas, and it was, I take a lot of inspiration mainly from the building itself, and it's an Art Deco building, and so we got a lot of Art Deco furniture, obviously. And that room you're talking about, it had quite a damaged ceiling from a water leak. So damaged so that we couldn't actually bring people into the space.
Right.
Because it looked like a big chunk of plaster might fall off onto someone's head. But there was a balcony on the outside, and we realized that people could view it from the exterior. And then I came up with the idea of where it's situated in the house, it feels like a study or something like that's what would have been in there. So you could look over the back garden, but then it has this leak, and what would happen if they just left that leak going forever? And it was like it would flood eventually, it would fill up. And so we kind of just exaggerated that again. And the first issue was that it's on the first floor, and I spoke to some structural engineers, and they just told me it wouldn't hold that amount of water because water is surprisingly heavy.
Yes.
In a larger quantity. So what we had to do was raise the floor itself to create an illusion of much more water. And I think the water was only maybe 2 or 3 inches deep. And we put a lot of black ink there just to make it,
look deeper.
Yeah, look deeper. And then we just cut all the furniture in half and then put it back in the water, and it just would sink underneath. Yeah.
And you thought that it was really sunk. All the furniture had sunk into because of the rise of the water. Just beautiful. And the fact is that you had you made it the library with all the books and the spines of the books and painting on that. So clever, but would have been quite hard for you as well, was it?
Yeah, technically, as far as the painting go, it's because I don't use spray paint. I have to use I use a brush. It's just hard to paint over. So it's just really, really rough.
Yeah.
So I actually chose an image specifically that didn't have a high amount of detail because I knew I was going to struggle to paint it. But I constructed the whole concept in the room, not even knowing if it was going to work.
Oh, wow.
If the effect was going to work.
Wow.
And it was one of those things that's I wouldn't know until I'd done the entire thing.
Yeah.
So it was, quite a leap of faith on that one. And my backup plan was just to shut the door and not let no one go onto the balcony. If it didn't work, that was my plan B.
What a joy though when it did work. And so it was a surprise for you as well for me as the viewer.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And I love the fact that when we entered, we walked through these red velvet curtains here, beautiful red velvet curtains with a spotlight, and it was almost here we go. I love that aspect of it. And the fact is that because it was a function area and a hotel, that there was this one round table with all glasses piled up and all the cobwebs, and you really thought of a lot of the very, apart from your art on the walls, it was a joy just to wander through the place.
Yeah, it was fun to create those champagne tower.
Yeah.
There are a lot of almost cliche, decadent kind of things that we think of from classical movies and stuff like that. And
The Great Gatsby.
Yeah, definitely.
That almost looked like The Great Gatsby.
So it was kind of fun to be we can do this, and we can do this, just with the tools and some bits of wood, and we can kind of fake a lot of things, and it has the same look and presence. And you know, if it looks right, people will believe it's right.
Yeah,
And like
yeah.
that becomes the art of, you know, it's almost becomes a representational of the real thing, but you can't tell that it isn't even. Yeah.
Yeah. All of a sudden, let's all take a deep breath, people. You know, Flinders Street railway station, the iconic building. Everyone knows that upstairs in the main building, behind the famous clock, is a ballroom. Patricia Piccinini, who was seated on that couch last year, she did an exhibition there. But all of a sudden, you come in and give us what we're seeing behind us now, and the images will be appearing as we speak, the most extraordinary exhibition. Do you call it an exhibition or an installation? What do you?
I am terrible at this language they call English, so I can't find it really hard to define what I do anymore. Still, when people ask me, like, what do? I just tell them I'm a painter, and what kind of painting do I paint buildings. You know, just leave it at that sometimes. And it's like, it's kind of easier.
Okay, your English is terrible. So, well, exhibition
how to
or
explain
installation.
it, yeah.
But you're like, what you've done here, and again, that whole, you know, decaying, which in this building, it is quite decaying.
Yeah.
But the ballroom, for instance, you've created this, made it as if it was the old, you know, like, atrium where, you know, like it's all chipping away and all the ivy is dying, and then there's the beautiful painting at the end of it. The music that you have playing there and the lights coming and going, and you know, like, it's just beautiful. But then you go on this journey that every room you go into, like the old telephonists with all their work. You know, like my sister did that. You know, as a young girl, you know, she would have worked on one of them, and you know, like, or the mail room, or a kid's classroom, the sewing room, which was you know, like, because of the rag trade in Flinders Lane. Where did all the different concepts come from? What was your thought pattern when you were coming up with it? Did it take months and months?
It definitely took months. Yeah, I think the first time I walked in there was August 2019, and that was the first time I realised that it wasn't just the ballroom. There was all these other rooms.
Yeah.
And even to get to the ballroom, you had to pass them.
Yeah.
So that's when I realised, like, oh, there's so much more to create or to work from. And just from the vague amount of history that I learned about the building, I realised it was, you know, clearly a government administration building, but also there's a lot of community things that happen there. Like, people would go to fencing, or, you know, there would be classes. There was even like childcare there.
Okay.
And billiards, and like there's a library. And it's like, oh, it's quite a community hub, and that really interests me. And I kind of, you know, my vision is often, you know, simply for someone to walk into the building as if no one's been there for generations. But to kind of leave kind of presence or evidence of, you know, the people who were once there. Like, that's it, simply put. But it's like trying to make spaces that feel realistic enough to be in there, but surreal enough to be to put people into, like, you know, a sense of wonder and like that Storyland kind of feeling.
Well, you really do get the sense that, you know, like, everyone just left and they didn't take anything with them, where all the rooms were totally empty when you took it on. But so therefore the creation that you've done, the amount of time and effort, and it would have been hard getting all the equipment up, because you know, you can't knock a wall out or to bring in all this stuff. It must have been taking you hours and hours and months to get all the stuff up there.
Yeah, it certainly did. But I think that was it. Like, from the very beginning, I was like, all right, what are our challenges and limitations? And I always tried to stay flexible and work within those boundaries. So when we came up for the ridiculous idea of, like, you know, the glass house or the library, it's like, all right, but everything has to come down to a piece, no taller than, you know, 200 centimeters, no wider than 80 centimeters. And, and we just, like, all right, we can make a lot out of putting those pieces together. And so we just designed for that, and that was kind of our starting point. It's like, doesn't matter if there's 500 of them, we know we can get them in bit by bit, and flat pack and unpack and put back together. Yeah.
So how many people were working on it at one time?
It's, like there was probably about 4 people in just like production, administration, negotiating all the red tape stuff, and then there's probably 5 or 6 of us building and painting.
Is that all? 5 or 6 of you
Yeah,
building?
we definitely had more people come in at a time. But I wouldn't say there was more than 10 people who actually were hands-on constructing and building stuff.
You must have gone home exhausted every night.
Yeah. But but then as the show opens and we involve like Nick Batterham, who did the sound, like he's the composer, but then he has maybe 15 musicians that he's individually recorded for each track, and then there's a sound engineer team, and so all up it kind of grows and grows and grows. There's about 120 people responsible for the entire project.
Whoa.
So like then there's a logistics company that help move everything in, and there's half a dozen people there. So it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and
Got to talk about the library, because you mentioned there was a library there originally, but you created that library. Like you built the actual casing as well, a 2-story high building, which you see of those beautiful old libraries around the world, with a spiral staircase, I might add. But you brought all that in. How many books did you bring in?
There's 7,500 books.
Whoa.
It was, and from, what I learnt doing the previous one that we flooded, books are extremely heavy when you multiply them.
Especially old books as well.
Especially old books. And they're quite hard to source. Like, the challenge with that previous one was like, we wanted that leather-bound look, and, like the legal books, and they're extremely expensive, so the cheapest way to do it was encyclopedias. And then we found out that no one wants to... Well, people want to sell them, but if you buy them online, the shipping's, 10 times what the value is. And then, so most place I found them was all on Gumtree. And so with every single one was a negotiation to buy the set and a story about how their mother or father paid $1,000 for them in the 80s and they've never been used, so they're in great condition. And I had to just lowball everyone and say, I'll give you $20 for them. Everyone gets upset and then start again with the next person. And it was there was moments like there's photographs of my station wagon. We're just throwing encyclopedias in the back of it, and it took 3 months to collect enough books for 64 meters of shelves.
Whoa.
And then I designed this, and it was like I worked out this just shy of 500 meters of shelves.
Yeah.
So I was like, I just know we couldn't get enough books, and then the load limitations, like structural engineering on the building, wouldn't take the weight of that many books as well. I think it would have been something like 30 ton of books. So I started sourcing fake books, and you might have seen them when you go into like Freedom or IKEA, and I was like, there must be a way to do this. And I did find some manufacturers overseas that make them, and it was all looking good. And then I get to the point of shipping, and we kind of worked out the volume, and it came to 3 shipping containers.
Whoa.
And then pandemic, pricing, and a shipping container would cost you 20 grand to move. So it just totally just blew out, and I was like, oh, I can't do this. And that was kind of upsetting, so I had to go back to the drawing board and look at the books themselves, and I was trying to get them to flat pack them or something like that, and so we could reconstruct them once they got here. And everything we looked at just looked flimsy, like a cereal box. And it wasn't going to be, I kind of wanted to be real enough, just right on that edge of, convincing from 2 feet back. And then Hannah, who works with me, just mentioned, she's like, oh, couldn't you do them like a Russian doll? So they nest inside each other. And yeah, that was the moment where I was like, yeah, okay. And it went from 3 shipping containers to a third of a shipping container, and that was a lot more viable.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this is it. This is
Yeah.
it. We're going to do this. So I ordered 8,000 books basically, and yeah.
Well, that's a story in itself.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, there's all the cobwebs over them, and in the corner there are strewn just pages. And again, you painted on the spine of books. It's beautiful, and the lighting that you use, and the music, and then there's the mailing room, and they've got all these little like sort of pigeonholes for the letters, I suppose. And you've painted on that. I suppose you closed them all and then painted on it. Would have been the way around it. But then in this classroom, which is beautiful in itself as well, with the blackboard, and you've painted on that. But then on the little desks, there is even pencil shavings where you've pencil sharpened, just sitting on one of the little desks, and the detail of everything you've done is just so beautiful, and there's postcards on the ground, and they've been written on, and it's all dust all over them, but of course there isn't. It's just walking around thinking, oh no, that's not looking old enough. And are you now worried that people are going to bend down to pick one up and steal one or stand on it?
It'll happen. People stand on things, and that's a bit of the nature of it. But it's trying to create a space that it's, you lift it up and it's real, in a sense.
But there is somebody in each room keeping an eye on it, isn't there?
So there's people around, so they're not going to walk out with a chair or something.
Or the pencil shavings.
Pencil shavings, and it's like, if I lose a few pencil shavings, I don't know. If it's important enough for someone to have that pencil shaving, they can have it. There's no real value to it on its own. It tells a story in its place and context, but without that, it's nothing. I think it's the sum of all parts when it comes together, and it's those details, like doing it to such the micro scale that it lets people stay within the moment. Like you can't look close enough to see where it falls apart, and I think that's kind of really helps people just really immerse themselves within it.
And then there's the little shop, again, it's all abandoned, but there's a couple of really old women's weeklies or a magazine like that, and then like some of the lolly packets and strewn on the floor. It must have been so much work and effort, but so much fun at the same time, was it?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Making up, our own logos and stationery, and designing the books, and like working out how to make a spiral staircase. It was something that we had.
Did you make that?
Yeah, we just made it from scratch.
Whoa!
Because I got to the point where I realized, I looked at trying to purchase a spiral staircase, and you look at how they come, and it's like, just a plate and a side, and you repeat and step up.
And they would be quite heavy as well, too, wouldn't they?
Extremely heavy, yeah. A lot of them are cast iron.
They are, yeah.
And it's like, I think we can make this out of wood, and we can just cut it out ourselves. It doesn't need to be structural. We don't want anyone to go up.
No.
Because we built the balconies, and we know they don't hold anyone.
Yeah.
So we can't have anyone go up there.
No.
So I was like, we can just make spiral staircase ourselves. And I also couldn't work out how to find a matching pair. They go opposite directions. And I was like, if we make them ourselves, we can just flip our template and cut it out backwards and repeat it again. And it was. We didn't know if it was going to work until we put it together as well.
Yeah, fantastic, yeah. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
On this whole exhibition, installation, whatever we want to call it. You must have been absolutely exhausted at the end of it, and the reaction has been so positive. That must be lovely for you.
It is. It's been, the reaction's been phenomenal, and, I've had to really sit on it and just be quiet about it for years, because I honestly didn't wasn't sure if it was going to ever happen.
Yeah.
And I just kept moving forward with the designs and building and constructing and employing people for it, and just going ahead. And we started looking at second locations more than once.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because we weren't sure we were ever going to get the lease for the space.
Yeah. And the fact is, just the cost of everything you've just described to us today must be astronomical. And that's a worry in itself. Keeping that under control. And which is a problem for artists. Full stop. So congratulations on a massive effort, and the fact that it's already been extended because the demand is so great for tickets. And again, only so many people can be in there at one time. You don't want to be in there with hordes of people. No. You want to be able to wander through, listen to the music, because they're each major section has music, and then the lights go down and the music finishes and then it restarts again. So you need to have that moment of just feeling how wonderful it is, don't you?
Yeah, it's really, really nice.
Yeah. Rone, thank you so much for chatting with us. You would have to be one of the most exhausted people in the universe right at this very moment. But thank you for what you do, because I'm a big fan and I love seeing everything you do. So you're going to have
David.
My pleasure. But you're going to have a big rest. Have you already started thinking about something for the future?
I'm always thinking about something else.
Are you? Oh, wow. But it will be obviously a couple of years before it rears its head.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you again.
Thank you, David. Cheers.
You've been watching The Art Hunter. I'm David Hunt, and we'll be back again real soon. Make sure you go and see this exhibition. It's amazing. See ya.